Welcome to this episode of the Sports Detective Podcast Show. My name is James Williams, and today we are talking Oregon Ducks football, and I am joined by Max Torres, who is covering the Oregon Ducks for Scoop Duck on 3. He also hosts the Scoop Duck podcast, covers a lot of Oregon recruiting. And Max, I wanted to start here before we talk about the team this year and kind of how the program is as a whole. I do want to look back on Oregon last year because I feel like the way that the season ended, it kind of just makes us have a little bit of a sour taste in our mouth. And maybe some people think that, like, hey, this Oregon team, yeah, they ran through the Big Ten, they won the Big Ten championship, but because they got just demolished by Ohio State in the Rose Bowl, that some people maybe think that last season was, fraudulent, which I think is kind of stupid because last year should be viewed as like, one of the greatest seasons in school history. So how is like the program and even the fan base viewing last season?
I think overall the program and the fan base are viewing last season as a success. Obviously, if you ask a player or a coach on the team, then they'll be pretty upset with how the season ended against Ohio State in the Rose Bowl. So anyone's going to want a better result than that. But I think that it was overall a big success. I think that the Big Ten championship in their first year as conference members gets lost in the shuffle because they looked so bad in the Rose Bowl. But I mean, they got no one to blame but themselves because they're the ones that played that game, and they'd be the first ones to tell you that. So I think that the Rose Bowl loss kind of overshadows the success of the season as a whole. But they did a tremendous job. They had a Heisman Trophy finalist for the second straight year, broke a program record for most NFL draft picks in a single draft. So the bar keeps getting higher under Dan Lanning. And I think that overall this season was a success, but they came up short of their ultimate goal, which is the national championship.
Yeah, too, you're in a new conference, your first year in the conference, you're playing a bunch of teams that you've never played before, and you're having to travel longer distances than, every other week than the program's ever traveled before. So I do think like it was an incredible degree of difficulty that Oregon did to, get to 13-0. But obviously, as you said, the ultimate goal is winning a national championship. I want to talk about the program as a whole and kind of the history of the program here for a second, because going back to Bellotti was very successful at Oregon. Chip Kelly took them to a whole other level. Helfrich had a few good years. Mario Cristobal had some very good success at Oregon too. It does feel like, though, over the last 3 years since Dan Lanning took over Oregon, it does feel like this program is taking a step in the direction where they are one of, like, the top 5 or 6 premier programs in all of college football. Have you seen just a difference in the program since Dan Lanning has taken over, whether that be recruiting, whether that just be national recognition, or just, just the attitude of how Oregon views itself?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that I've seen a couple of changes as far as the way that I think the program operates and carries itself, and then just the kind of the swagger and the mentality that the players play with, because you can tell that those guys want to go out there and play for Dan Lanning. I think he really kind of embodies the players coach type for a head coach. I mean, his guys are fired up all the time. And I think that part of the reason they get that is because he's so confident in them. I think one of the biggest differences from the Cristobal years was that Dan Lanning's going to leave it out there on the field. He's going to lay it out there on the line. We've seen that most prominently with his fourth down calls in the past couple of seasons. Sometimes they work. You look like a genius. Sometimes it doesn't. And then everyone's yelling at you. But I think he's really all in. I know that we were talking a little bit before we recorded about how the Ducks have had like a lot of head coaches kind of rolling through. They think they have their guy, and then that coach only goes to take the dream job or some other job. But Dan Lanning's been all in on the Ducks for as long as he's been there. We know that when the Texas A&M job came open, there was discussion. Alabama came open after Saban retired, but he's saying that he wants to be there in Eugene as long as they'll have him. So I think that he's their guy for the long term.
He's a guy that I really wasn't in on, mostly because everyone was telling me how good he was. That kind of tells you a little bit about myself. And then just over the last, like, year or two, I've just really kind of grown and just seen how he's just recruited and how he's built the program and kind of what he stands for. And, there was a beautiful moment or a piece that was, broadcast on ESPN College Game Day, where they talked about his wife, and how he stuck by her side, and kind of you got to you got to see the man behind the whistle a little bit there. Can you give me maybe a story or two, just kind of like who Dan Lanning is as a just a human being?
Yeah, yeah. So that was definitely a big part of his story, was just how he supported his wife when she was battling cancer, and then eventually overcame it. And then his family got to help design the Stomp Out Cancer or breast cancer awareness uniforms that the Ducks wore last year, which was awesome to see. I believe that was the Michigan State game. The big one with the couple of stories with Lanning were obviously his what was the, I want to say impetus, but I don't know if that's the right word. But the very beginning of his coaching career, he was a PE teacher, I think, and then he drove from Missouri out to Pittsburgh to just kind of battle for that first gig, and just shows you how much he wants it. Kind of that lunch pail mentality that he tries to spread throughout his team. And then you look at what he did, maybe not so much him, I guess, but just his track record of playing under some of the best coaches in college football, and Nick Saban's probably the biggest one that he's uh, coached under. And then obviously they were tremendously successful, and then he went with Kirby Smart to coach up that Georgia defense when they won a national championship. And he's kind of just left a mark, I think, of success overall everywhere he's gone. And he's certainly taken that SEC blueprint to win a national championship, and applied it as best he can on the West Coast.
He's definitely a fighter, man, and you got to love guys that really want to fight, and you can see that with his demeanor on the sidelines at a lot of times. I do want to talk about this team that Oregon has this year. You brought up earlier that Oregon lost a lot of NFL talent, the most NFL draft picks in program history. So you might be thinking like, this might be a little bit of a down year for Oregon. But I think, too, and just talking about Dan Lanning, I think as long as he's the head coach, this team is always going to be competing for a national championship because of the way that he's been building his team. So even though you look at Oregon heading into this year, not a lot of experience, but is there a chance that even though this team isn't that experienced, it still just might be just as talented as it was a year ago?
I think that's super realistic, honestly. I mean, I don't think I would say that that's likely right now, just because I haven't seen them
Yeah,
play any
got to
games
see it
yet.
on the field.
But it's certainly right there for the taking, right there in their wheelhouse. Because I mean, Mateo said it best. I feel like at Big Ten Media Days, Mateo Uiagalelei, he's like, this team is probably just as talented, as not, if not more talented than last year. I think the only thing that we have to see is if they can prove it. And there's a lot of question marks around this team, because it is kind of a big transition era. There's a new wave of talent at a lot of different spots that I'm sure we'll get into a little bit more on this episode. But yeah, the horses are there, man. The Ducks got all the talent they need. Whether you're looking at the transfer portal or the high school ranks, they've been excelling in talent acquisition, and that's what you need to win a national championship.
Let's start with the quarterback. So the last 3 years, Oregon's quarterbacks have been Bo Nix for 2 years, and then Dylan Gabriel. Just absolute home runs out of the transfer portal. Now you got Dante Moore, who played a little bit at UCLA his true freshman year. He's the rare, really highly touted prospect that transfers not because of playing time, but he transfers to Oregon knowing that he's going to be the backup so that he can develop behind Dylan Gabriel for a year. Now it's his job. How do you think, or what's kind of the vibe of how his development process has been going over the last 2 years since he transferred to Oregon?
Yeah, the vibe overall is that he's developing pretty well. I think that he kind of had this reputation of like ridiculous arm talent, which we've seen on display a little bit, but not too much just yet. At least not at Oregon. We saw some of that at UCLA, but then also poise. I think poise and maturity are two of the other words that come to mind. With the way that he's carried himself in the media scrums, he seems like he's kind of a man beyond his years type of a persona. And I think that that's probably the guy that Oregon fans might be the most excited to see this year. You spoke about the experience with Nix and Gabriel. Like I guess you could say Dante's kind of lack of experience is part of why I'm so excited to see him this year, because it's been a little bit more of a sure thing. And there's just a little bit of a layer of mystery that comes with what the quarterback position is going to look like. So I think his development's going really good, and we're going to see multiple instances. I think it's kind of hard to say, but I think we'll see multiple instances where, he just does something where you have to have an elite feel for the game, and he'll be getting asked about it in the post game, and he'll talk about maybe a lesson or two that he learned from Dylan Gabriel during his time, just kind of waiting in the wings.
A lot of receptions are going to be open this year. You guys obviously lost Tez Johnson to the NFL. I know. Why am I blanking on his name? Evan Bryant. Had a
Evan
knee,
Stewart.
or Evan Stewart. Sorry, I don't know why I said Bryant. Evan Stewart had a knee injury, so he's going to be out for a while, maybe even out for the whole season. I'm not sure how serious, or when the timetable of his return would even be. But the good news is, you talk about unknown, you talk about inexperience. You guys got the number one wide receiver in all college football, and we saw a few true freshmen stand out last year. Ryan Williams at Alabama, Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State. I know it's unfair to say that Dakorien Moore will have an impact like they did, those two guys did for their respective teams. But is there a chance here that he might be, just the one of the most impactful freshmen in all of college football, and even like the leading guy getting targets on this Oregon offense?
I think that's definitely a possibility. I don't think it's unrealistic to say that. And I think the reason that, some people maybe have a problem like verbalizing that sentence is that we just haven't seen a lot of true freshman wide receivers make an instant impact at Oregon. If you look at the last guy who was kind of playing as a true freshman, Troy Franklin, who's now in the NFL, he didn't even really make that much of an impact as a true freshman. But that was when Mario Cristobal was calling the shots. And we know that he was incredibly reluctant to pass the ball while he was at Oregon, even though he had an NFL receiver and Justin Herbert on his team. But I think that Dakorien has all the ability in the world, and everything I've heard has been rave returns since he got there to Eugene. You never want to rely on a true freshman to be your guy, and I don't think that's the situation Oregon finds themselves in. We got other guys to talk about there, like Jeremiah McCullen. Malik Benson comes over from Florida State. Kyler Casper is healthy now, the 6'6", 200-plus pound wideout after battling a couple of broken feet, foot injuries, I
Ooh.
should say. So yeah, it's there's a ton of interest around this wide receiver room, and not to mention, James, you got a new coach coming over in Ross Douglas from Syracuse. Now that Junior Adams got hired by the Cowboys, so I think Dakorien Moore could be Oregon's Jeremiah Smith or Ryan Williams, but I don't think it's quite fair to expect that from him right out of the gate. But I think he's going to have a heck of an impact this year, and we're also going to see Kenyon Sadiq getting a whole lot of touches as well.
Can you talk about Kenyon Sadiq a little bit? Because that's just what I was going to ask you about. Why is everyone so excited about him? It seems like he's just kind of like an athletic freak, isn't he?
Yeah, that's really, I think, where it starts. I mean, he's like 6'4", 240 plus, or maybe it was like 6'3", but he's got a I don't know if I'd say prototypical build, but just really, really, really good athleticism. Can run like crazy. He can pass block for you as well. He didn't really like produce at an elite level since he's been at Oregon, but he did catch 2 touchdowns in the Big Ten title game against Penn State. So like when the lights were brightest, he really showed up for the Ducks. And I think that he kind of maybe got lost in the shuffle last year because he had a couple of NFL guys, and Terrence Ferguson, and I think Patrick Herbert is still with the Jags last I saw. But he had 2 veterans that were kind of ahead of him, but he was still getting touches, and that's just kind of a guy that can do it all for them. I think they want to use him in a lot of different ways. Will Stein wants to make sure that you get him the ball this year. So the hype really seemed like it kind of reached a new level, like almost a fever pitch during Big Ten media days in Las Vegas. And there's a lot of speculation or just maybe excitement that he could be right there in the conversation for one of the best tight ends in the country this year. And he also got nominated for the Mackey Award. So, you're seeing a little bit of that backed up as well.
The big name on this offense, though, even though we talked about the quarterback, we talked about the wide receivers, someone that has a lot of experience playing the running back position, not necessarily at Oregon, Mekhi Hughes, who's the transfer from Tulane. He had 1,400 yards, 15 touchdowns last year. He's got to be the star of this offense, right? Everything's going to be, it's going to be a very Mekhi Hughes-centered offense. Am I wrong?
No, I don't think you're wrong. I just think that Rashad Samples actually spoke about this last week in his press conference, just about how they have so much talent in that running back room. and running backs get hurt. So I don't expect him right now to be the bell cow back like he maybe was at Tulane. And that's not for any lack of ability. I think it's just because you want to try to keep your running backs fresh and have change of pace guys. Like I think back to when Jordan James was a freshman at Oregon in 2022. He's with the 49ers now, but he had a little bit of a role as that third down back, that short yardage back. So we'll see plenty of Mekhi Hughes this year. I don't doubt that at all. I'm kind of interested to see how he can impact this offense as a pass catcher. But until we learn that, I think we're going to see a lot of Noah Whittington as well, who has shown some flashes at Oregon, but just didn't quite seem himself 100% last year after coming back from that season-ending knee injury when they just blew the brakes off of Colorado in 2023. So I think that Noah is more of that pass catching back, and then we're also going to see that third back emerge, and I think it's probably Dink Riggs, the redshirt freshman, I want to say, from Washington D.C. I mean, there's so much talent in that room. De'Aaron Hill, Jordan Davison, the talented true freshman. Jalen Lamar is back. I thought he was going to transfer, but he's back for another year. So like, you're never going to have to worry about talented running backs wanting to come to Oregon, and that's another loaded room.
That's always what it's been, going back to like LaMichael James. That's the one I remember when I was younger. He was an absolute
Right.
stud. Um, Dan Lanning knows defense. Ever since he got to Oregon, this has been a very good defense. They've been getting better every single year. You brought up Mateo Uyungale earlier, the returning Big Ten sacks leader. I want to talk more about the unknown with this Oregon defense, and I'm looking at the secondary because there's a lot of new faces there, and again, it's one of those things that we're talking about with Dan Lanning. He's getting in a bunch of talent from, the transfer portal and, even just the high school recruiting. Can you talk to me about like some of the guys that are going to be starting in the secondary? Because that's the unknown of this team that I think could, maybe sneakily be a strength just by, some of my research.
Yeah, I think the secondary could wind up being a strength for Oregon at some point. But it does also feel like a gigantic mystery right now. I mean, you asked for the starters, and I don't think I could tell you all the starters, to be totally honest. I think that the one guy that maybe two that you feel comfortable penciling in are Dylan Thieneman at safety, the Purdue transfer. Just had an incredible true freshman year. Production dipped a little bit last year, but he's kind of the face at the safety spot. You're also looking at Kingston Lopa, who is I think Kingston Lopa might be like the Kenyon Sadiq of the Oregon defense, just like that freak athlete kind of guy, 6'5", 200 plus pounds, got some snaps in the Big Ten title game and was tasked with covering Tyler Warren. So that's a guy that they're feeling comfortable about. And then you also look down at corner, and Jaleel Florence is back. He's the most experienced guy in that room. Missed almost all of last season, I think, with a knee injury that he actually suffered on the tail end of the 23 season. So like that dude hasn't seen the field in forever, but he was a starter when he was healthy. So I think that you feel a little bit more comfortable about the cornerback room with having at least one guy back there. Theron Johnson comes over from Northwestern, and he was a former all-conference guy. So he's played Big Ten football at a high level, and I think having the front that Oregon does on the defensive line is only going to help those guys play freely. But then you have some other really highly anticipated recruits. Ife Obadegwu has kind of been the guy that's been buzzing in fall camp here. He's a redshirt freshman, and he made some good plays. Had a scoop and score, I want to say, or comboed with Blake Purchase in the spring game. And then you also have Naeem Offord, who was the number one cornerback in the country last year, Alabama's top prospect in the state, 5-star plus guy, so consensus 5-star. Like there's just talent all over that secondary, but just we haven't seen that many guys actually get on the field because they've had veterans in front of them, or they got portal guys in. That's probably the position group I'm the most excited about for next year, James, is the secondary.
Might have some growing pains, but I'm sure they'll end up being fine. I do want to, because we are kind of running out of time here, I do want to ask you one question, because I've been fascinated by, Oregon as a program for a very long time now, because, the fact that, you talked about earlier about like, some people like try to own Oregon, and the people that are the Oregon haters are like, oh my God, it's a stepping stone program. Everyone goes and leaves. Chip Kelly's going to the NFL. Cristobal's going to Miami, and that's just what all the coaches do. But I do think one thing about Oregon, though, is it's just a good program because just about every coach that they hire comes in and is just winning a bunch of games. And I'm more interested in the Chip Kelly tenure at Oregon, because I think it's a lot shorter than what people actually, realize and remember. It was only 4 years, but it was just an insane 4 years. He's going to the Rose Bowl twice. He wins a Rose Bowl. He wins a Fiesta Bowl. He goes to a BCS national championship. He's 46-7 in his time at Oregon. And I'm just looking at Chip Kelly post Oregon, where he's going to the Eagles, and that doesn't last long. Then he goes to the Niners, and that's a disaster. And then he goes to UCLA, and it's kind of, man, everyone at UCLA hated him, and now he's been bouncing around as an offensive coordinator. Did Chip Kelly just make like a terrible mistake leaving Oregon? Because I feel like if he just stays, he could still be the head coach there now, and with the momentum that they had in the early 2010s, late 2000s, like maybe he wins a national championship at Oregon.
Yeah, I think you can certainly make the case for it. I don't know if I would say that it was a mistake for him to leave. I do know that on the tail end of his days as a head
Could have
coach
had a
at
statue
UCLA.
there.
Yeah, I know, but I don't know if Chip Kelly would still want to be a head. I think that was why he took the OC job at Ohio State, is because he had the opportunity. Like, hey, you're like still an offensive genius, but how about we take a step back so you don't have to run the entire program? Because there was a lot of chatter coming out of SoCal just about how Chip doesn't like to recruit. You got to recruit if you're a head
100%.
coach in this day and age. He went to just focus on offense, which is his bread and butter. Won a national championship with the Buckeyes. I actually saw Chip Kelly at a high school showcase a couple of years ago, and he was wearing that Buckeye on his shirt, and it just felt really jarring to see. And then now we'll see what he can do with the Raiders. So I know that he was a just massive win for Oregon as a coach. Just changed the game of college football, the tempo of everything. And then now you have kind of every program doing that in some way or another. So I think Oregon fans are immensely grateful for what he did. And they're definitely, to some degree, maybe lesser now that he won a national championship with the Buckeyes. I think that's a guy that they want to root for and are always going to be grateful for.
He should have stayed. I will never not think that. Just ride the momentum, Chip. He because he was just like cutting edge with a lot of different things. And if anything, now I think he's like, a lot of people have caught up with you with stuff with like nutrition and health and like the way he runs an offense, and it's definitely been more modernized from what he was doing back then. But should have stayed. That's my opinion. Max, we're running out of time here. Do you want to tell us where we can find all of your content, and then we'll get out of here?
Sure. Always appreciate that, James. Thanks so much. So you can follow me on any social media platform at mtorressports. You can read me over on scoopduck.com, part of the On3 network. You can watch me on YouTube, ScoopDuck On3, and then you can listen to me anywhere you get your podcasts at the Ducks Dish Podcast.
Absolutely. We'll have the link for his podcast in the description below. Thank you out there for watching. If you like this episode, make sure you hit like, hit subscribe if you haven't done so already. Leave a comment. What do you think Oregon's going to do this year? Who do you think is going to be the best players on this team? What do you think of, me and Max, our commentary on this? You can yell at us, you can tear us apart, or you can tell us that we're handsome. We did an absolutely great job. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.